The message came at midnight. Captain Ibrahim Traoré, leader of Burkina Faso, received a formal letter, sealed with the insignia of an international media giant. A global broadcast debate, Africa, the West Truth or Power, was set to air live from Geneva in just 5 days. Among the names invited, President Macron, UN representatives, and surprisingly FBI Director Christopher Wray read the list twice. He knew what this was. It wasn't just a panel, it was a stage for control, a subtle attempt to corner leaders like him into silence. But this time, Traoré wasn't going to Bessalent. He had something they never expected. Proof. Proof of what his people had whispered about for years. Interference, exploitation, surveillance, pain. He closed the file slowly and said just 4 words to his advisor. Book the next flight. Outside, the wind howled like an omen. Inside, a storm had just begun to reese. And the world had no idea what was about to unfold. When Traoré walked into the Geneva studio, the entire crew stopped. He wasn't like the others. No suit, no smile, just a calm, determined face, and his signature green beret worn proudly. He nodded at no one. He wasn't here for applause. Director Christopher Wray was already seated, papers in hand, barely lifting his eyes. They hadn't met in person before, but Traoré had studied him 4 years from afar. Intelligence leaks, human rights reports, hidden funding trails. He sat down across from Wray, eyes locked, no handshake, no words, just silence. The room buzzed with tension. Cameras adjusted, producers whispered into earpieces. Then the host's voice echoed, "Welcome to our live international broadcast." Red lights blinked on air. What followed next would shake continents. But as the show opened with cheerful political commentary, Traoré stayed still, calm, focused until Wray spoke. A smug line about stability in Africa pierced the air. The host chuckled, but Tree's eyes didn't move. He knew what was coming, and he was ready to pull the first thread that would unravel everything. "I'm sorry," Traoré said, cutting the host off mid-sentence. The studio froze. Yvette, the cameraman, blinked in confusion. Traoré leaned forward slightly, voice calm. "Before we talk about stability, you want to read a message I received from a mother in Ouagadougou." The screen behind him flickered. A letter appeared, a tear-stained piece of lined paper. "My son disappeared last year. They said he joined a terrorist group, but he was just a student. I found out he had been questioned by foreign men. I still don't know where his body is." Gasps. The studio fell silent. Christopher Wray shifted uncomfortably. He adjusted his mic, cleared his throat. Traoré continued. "This is not isolated. We have reports, names, locations, and times of covert American involvement that led to civilian disappearances. And Director Wray, many of those reports trace back to your agency." The host stuttered. "Captain, this isn't confirmed." Traoré's voice cut, sharper now. "It is confirmed, and I'll show you." The studio light flickered again. This time it wasn't a letter. It was a document stamped classified, and the scandal had just gone live. Had just the camera zoomed in. The studio lights reflected off the now visible classified document marked with a red stamp, Confidential Afric Report. Traoré held it gently like a fragile truth finally brought into the light. "Tell them what this says, Director Wray," he said. Wray shifted. "This is taken out of context. That's not a valid." Traoré didn't raise his voice, but his eyes, they burned. "Page 2, paragraph 4. Read it or I will." The host whispered something to the producer, but no one stopped the broadcast. "Not now," Traoré began. "Subject classified. Local contact neutralized. No. Media coverage permitted. Collateral damage. 2 women, 3 minors." The studio gasped. "These weren't terrorists," Traoré continued. "They were farmers. One of the children was 6. His name was Issa. His mother is watching this right now, somewhere in Burkina Faso." A mother clutched her chest, sobbing. "This is not justice. This is not security. This is invasion." In silence, Wray stared, jaw tight, but Traoré didn't blink. For the first time in decades, Africa wasn't asking for permission to speak. It was demanding to be heard, and the world, it was finally listening. "You want to show you a video," Trey said. Producers hesitated, but the screen changed. A dim cell phone recording played. Blurry, but the sound was clear. A woman barefoot crying in the dust, her voice breaking. "They took my husband. He wasn't a soldier. He just fixed radios. Please bring him back." That woman was Aminata Zongo. She'd never been on TV. She had no title, no power, just pain. Traoré turned to the camera. She recorded this 2 hours after American drones left their village. That village wasn't a military site. It was a school we rebuilt after years of war. Wray fidgeted. These operations, if they happened, were authorized by a joint command. Traoré leaned closer. "So you admit it happened?" The air froze. Wray looked into the lens, then looked away. The host had no words. Traoré's voice grew soft. "When I was 13, I saw a boy step on a landmine left behind by foreign troops. His name was Karim. Headied in my arms." The silence became unbearable. "And yet," he whispered, "they still say they're here to help." The camera caught it, a tear rolling down Traoré's cheek, and millions watching wept with him. While the studio reeled, viewers across the world were on edge. But in a small room in Ouagadougou, a young hacker named Alan was watching too, heart-pounding. He'd once worked with whistleblowers. Now he had something Trey needed. Alan opened a folder labeled GhostStep, a secret American surveillance project tracking African journalists, activists, and even government ministers. As the broadcast played on his cracked TV, he sent a signal through a secure line. Back in Geneva, Traoré's phone buzzed once. He looked at the screen. Just one word appeared: delivered. Trey turned to the host. "I have new evidence coming in right now. If your producers permit, I'd like to show it." The host froze. The director waved. The live feed continued. Traoré uploaded the first image, a real-time U.S. surveillance map of Burkina Faso showing schools, mosques, and people. "Why is the FBI watching teachers?" he asked. The room was ice cold. Wray stared at the screen like he'd seen a ghost. He knew what was coming next, and deep down, he knew the truth was no longer theirs to bury. As the broadcast continued, millions watched in absolute silence. Then Traoré tapped his tablet again. A second file appeared on the studio screen. The audience gasped. It was labeled Operation Flint Dust, Strategic Mapping of Civil Influence. Inside were hundreds of red dots scattered across Burkina Faso: markets, churches, radio stations, even orphanages. Wray's face turned pale. "These are not threats," Traoré said softly. "These are civilians, children, mothers." He pointed to one red dot. "This one, that's Maison Dion, an orphanage that was raided by unknown forces last year. 3 children disappeared. One of them had sickle cell anemia. His name was Sumila." Trey's voice cracked. "Sumila was just 7. His tiny sandals were later found in a bush 200 meters from a burned-out hut. Noon claimed the raid until now. How do you explain this, Mr. Wray?" Wray didn't answer. The studio lights dimmed slightly. In the control room, a producer whispered, "This is getting too real." But no one dared cut the feed because the world had crossed a line where truth was no longer political but personal. In the middle of the broadcast, a studio assistant rushed in holding a flash drive. "Captain, someone sent this from inside the U.S. State Department." The host hesitated. "Should we verify?" Traoré interrupted. "Let the world see it." On screen appeared a scanned letter, top secret, marked eyes only for immediate destruction. But someone had saved it. It was dated just 6 weeks before the Geneva broadcast, and in it a chilling sentence stood out. "In light of rising African nationalism, psychological pressure and influence campaigns must be intensified through proxy operations." The room went quiet. Then a clip followed. An intercepted voice recording of a high-ranking American official saying, "Control the narrative. If Traoré gets too loud, we isolate him diplomatically." Traoré didn't shout. He didn't flinch. He just said, "You tried to silence us with shadows, but now the sun is rising." Online, Twitter and YouTube exploded. The hashtag Africa Speaks Now was trending in 42 countries. But what viewers didn't know backstage, something even more dangerous was brewing. Someone had just cut the studio's external feed. Suddenly, black screen across millions of devices. The live stream froze. Viewers stared, confused, angry. Was it over? In the control room, engineers scrambled. Satellite links being jammed. One yelled, "This is external." Inside the studio, the host's face turned pale. "We're off air," he whispered. Traoré looked around calmly. "This was expected," he said. Then, from his pocket, he pulled out a USB. "This is the backup. We anticipated interference." Wray slammed his hand on the table. "You're trying to start something you don't understand, Captain." "No," Traoré said. "I'm trying to end something you thought would never be uncovered." As tech staff rebooted systems, Traoré turned to the in-studio cameras and pointed, "Keep recording. Even if the world can't see it now, they will." And they did. The moment wasn't lost. It became even more powerful because now people were waiting, hoping, desperate for what comes next. And in homes across Africa, mothers held their breath. Fathers wiped silent tears, and children asked, "Why did they stop the video?" But it hadn't stopped. It was only about to get more dangerous, heartbreaking, and real. The cameras were still rolling, though the world couldn't see. Traoré turned to the host and asked gently, "Can I bring someone in?" Before the host could reply, the side door opened slowly. A frail woman stepped in, wearing a yellow scarf. Her eyes were tired, her hands shaking. "This is Awa," Traoré said, "mother of Sumala, the 7-year-old orphan we spoke of." Gasps echoed through the studio. Awa looked at Wray, trembling. "Do you remember this face?" She held up a crumpled photo of her son. Missing teeth, bright eyes, innocent joy, frozen in time. "I begged the authorities. I cried at embassies," Noon answered. "But Captain Traoré," he listened. The studio went silent. Awa continued, tears rolling down her cheeks. "All I want is to know what happened. Where is my son?" Wray looked away. "I don't want revenge," she whispered. "I want the truth." The host lowered his head. A technician was wiping his eyes. Outside the studio, our justice for Sumala trended globally. People weren't just watching, they were weeping. The broadcast team had found a way to bypass the signal jam. They streamed directly to YouTube. Millions flooded back in, now watching with a burning hunger for truth. Traoré turned toward Wray, who was boxed in, cornered by facts, evidence, and raw emotion. "You said you came here to talk peace," Traoré said. "But peace is not silence. Peace is justice." Wray shifted uncomfortably. "With all due respect, Captain, this is based on speculation." Traoré raised his hand, then played an audio file. It was a man's voice, American, calm, chilling. "The operation near Ouagadougou is cleared. The child can be used as leverage." The world stopped breathing. Traoré stared hard at Wray. "Was this your voice?" Silence. The host turned pale. "Director Wray, for your own sake, answer him." But Wray stayed quiet. The host looked directly into the camera. "Ladies and gentlemen, this might be the biggest international scandal of our time." And just then, security agents entered the studio. The host panicked. "Are they here for Traoré?" "No," one agent barked. "They're here for him." They pointed at Christopher Wray. The crowd erupted. As the agents moved in, Awa collapsed to her knees, clutching her son's photo. Traoré rushed to her side. She was sobbing uncontrollably. "My baby, if he's alive, if he's not." She choked on her words. "Please let the world remember his name." Traoré held her, tears in his own eyes. In that moment, the broadcast was no longer political. It became human. It was about mothers, sons, and the pain of being forgotten. Awa's cry echoed across living rooms and phone screens. Comment sections overflowed. "I'm crying like I lost my own child. God bless Captain Traoré. This man has a heart of gold." Why is this not breaking every news headline? The studio lights flickered. Wray was escorted out, silent, ashamed, exposed. As he disappeared through the exit door, someone in the audience shouted, "This is Africa's reckoning." The host, voice trembling, looked into the camera and said, "Tonight, history changed." Outside, a candlelight vigil began forming. People held signs that read, "Sumila, we see you. Africa will not be silenced." And Traoré, he wasn't done yet. The most painful reveal was still to come. The studio lights dimmed as Traoré raised a small photo in his hand. "This boy," he said softly, "was found wandering near a border town 3 days. Ego, malnourished, silent, but alive." Gasps echoed. The image was of a child, dirty, fragile, with hollow eyes. Viewers watching from around the world leaned in, hearts racing. "He doesn't remember his name," Traoré continued, "but he drew this." He held up a piece of paper, a crude sketch of a plane, a gun, and a crying boy. And then, quietly, a kid walked onto the stage, the same boy from the photo. Awa stood up from the audience. Her lips trembled. "Sumela." The boy blinked. Awa began to sob uncontrollably. The child looked at her unsure. Then in a shaky whisper he said, "Mama." The entire studio broke into tears. Even the host couldn't speak. Traoré stepped back, letting them reunite. He whispered to the camera, "This is why I speak. Not for politics, for truth, for mothers, for children." Comment sections exploded. "I can't stop crying. This is the most powerful moment I've ever seen on YouTube. Thank you, Traoré." As Awa held her son tight, Traoré returned to the podium, his face stone-cold with grief. He pulled out a letter worn, folded many times, edges torn. "This," he said, "was written by a soldier who used to work in one of the black sites." The studio froze. "He sent this to me before he died under mysterious conditions." Traoré read aloud. "I was told we were saving lives, but we were destroying them. We were told these kids were future threats, but they were just children. I buried 3. I still hear them cry at night. Forgive me. If anything happens to me, tell the world the truth." The room went dead silent. The boy on stage looked up, confused. Awa held him tighter. The host turned to Traoré, barely holding back tears. "Why? Why would they do this?" Traoré answered. "Because they believe Africa must stay weak to keep others strong." In that moment, people weren't just angry, they were broken. Traoré walked to the center of the stage, holding a flash drive. "This is the file they didn't want you to see." He plugged it in. On screen, drone footage of a secret base near Burkina Faso's northern border. Children in cages. Foreign soldiers guarding the compound. And worst of all, a U.S. flag in the corner of the compound wall. The audience screamed. The host whispered, "Dear God." Traoré's voice cut through the chaos. "This isn't just about Burkina Faso. This is about every African nation that has been lied to, robbed, and broken for profit." The feed spread globally. Protests erupted in real time across capitals, from Lagos to London, Cairo to Chicago. Millions stood up, and Ibrahim Traoré became a symbol not of rebellion, but of truth. The boy, now clinging to his mother, watched it all with wide eyes and whispered, "Thank you, Captain." The broadcast wasn't supposed to reach that far, but it did. News stations were hijacked. Social media exploded. WhatsApp groups in tiny villages buzzed with one name, Traoré. From South Africa to Senegal, millions watched in real time as their pain was finally spoken aloud. Across the globe, journalists scrambled. Leaked files, photos, and testimonies flooded the internet. Whistleblowers from other African nations came forward, confirming the same patterns of exploitation. In Washington, D.C., panic spread like wildfire. The press asked Christopher Wray to respond. He refused. But then came the biggest twist. A former American diplomat, anonymous at first, confirmed everything. "We were warned about Traoré. The message said he wasn't supposed to survive long, but he did. And now he's telling the truth." In Burkina Faso, the streets overflowed with people holding candles and photos of lost loved ones. But they weren't crying in silence anymore. They were crying together. That night, Traoré addressed the world from a quiet room. No flags, no makeup, just truth. He looked into the camera, not with anger, but deep sorrow. "There are names we'll never know," he began. "Children buried in unnamed graves, mothers still waiting at the border, men who vanished in deserts." He paused. "I don't want revenge. I want restoration." He held up a worn notebook, one kept by a young soldier who had once guarded every camp's trair exposed. Inside were names, coordinates, sketches, descriptions. "I promised him this would not be buried with him," Traoré said. He passed the notebook to the host. "This is the roadmap for justice." The camera zoomed in on a drawing. A mother and son holding hands, smiling under the sun. The child's name written in the corner, Sumila. Viewers around the world broke down. People began to post their own stories of loss. Hashtags like "Truth for Africa" and "I Stand with Traoré" trended globally. No one expected what would happen next. Days later, the UN was forced to speak. Governments across Europe launched investigations. Funding to covert operations in Africa was frozen. Protesters gathered outside embassies chanting, "We see you now." In Burkina Faso, Awa and her son were given a new home. But more than that, they were surrounded by love. Sumila, once lost in silence, was now laughing. His favorite toy, a little wooden plane hand-carved by Traoré himself and the captain. He walked, alone through a quiet village one evening, greeted by children who ran to him shouting, "Hero! Hero!" He smiled softly, but when no one was watching, he knelt near a small grave marked with a stone. He whispered, "We did it, my brother. We did it," then stood tall, wiping a tear from his eye. This was never about fame. It was about freedom. If this story touched you, please, if your heart broke during this story, don't just scroll. Let Captain Traoré's courage live on. Hit like if you believe the world deserves the truth. Leave a comment. What moment moved you the most? Subscribe for more powerful stories that reveal what others try to hide. And most importantly, share this so no child is ever forgotten again. We stand with Traoré.